And welcome back to the Hot Lap. So, the question on everyone's lips as testing has now ended after the conclusion of day 3 is who won testing? Who are the winners? Who are the losers? Who are the champions of testing? So, this is the races article from testing, which we'll probably get into in a bit. But testing day 3 PM session, final classification. And it was George Russell that went fastest on day 3. But the caveat being, not the fastest overall. But Max Verstappen just a tiny bit behind him by 0.021. If you want to know, and you're just listening to this, George Russell did a 1:29.545 with 91 laps. That's quite impressive for half a day, isn't it? Verstappen did 81. And to be fair, Verstappen had a full day. Alex Albon also had a full day, 136 laps and just a tenth off the fastest Friday time. Bear in mind, it was his teammate Carlos Sainz who did the fastest time yesterday overall. And overall, I believe, has the fastest time. Lewis Hamilton finished 6th, about 8 tenths off. Pierre Gasly just under the half a second mark in his Alpine, with Oscar Piastri 4th, about 4 tenths off. And then 7th was Yuki Tsunoda. 8th, Esteban Ocon, just over a second. Charles Leclerc was 9th. Kimi Antonelli 10th. Lando Norris in 11th, 1.4 seconds off. And no, he's not going to be that much slower than the Mercedes. And this is what I mean by testing. You don't know, do you? Jack Doohan in 12th, 1.6 seconds off, or nearly 1.7 if I'm honest. Lance Stroll, he didn't do too much running. We'll get into why in a minute, but 2.1 seconds off. Then we have Nico Hülkenberg in 14th in the Kick Sauber. I nearly said Haas, but definitely in the Kick Sauber. Isaac Hadjar 15th, Fernando Alonso in 16th, 2.5 seconds off. Gabriele Bortoleto in 17th, and last but no means least was Oliver Behrman. 2.8 seconds, and let's be fair, the Haas pretty much once again doing their own thing, especially in the hands of Ollie and Behrman. So this is what I thought was quite interesting. This is the team development 2024, the difference to 2025, and it's Alpine that have found the most time, which is quite surprising because I thought it would be Williams, but I digress. Williams is in second. So Alpine found the most time compared to last year by 2 seconds, with Williams 1.6. Red Bull were the next. So that's dangerous, isn't it? 1.1 seconds faster. McLaren were 1 second faster, just over the 1 second mark. Haas was 0.9 seconds faster. Aston Martin 0.9, Mercedes 0.8, Ferrari just over half a second, Stake 0.4, and sadly it was the Racing Bulls that are the losers of this department with just shy of 3 tenths, 0.278. Now when we look at the top 10 fastest overall times, it is Carlos Sainz at a 1:29.348. In second is the Ferrari of Lewis Hamilton, a 1:29.379. We're talking hundredths, and hundredths behind Lewis was Lewis's teammate on a 4.31, a 1:29.43. And the next up with George Russell, 1:29.545, and within hundredths of that was Max Verstappen, and just around a tenth was Alex Albon. Kimi Antonelli on 1:29.784. Oscar Piastri on 1:29.940, Pierre Gasly on a 1:30.40, and Lance Stroll on a 1:30.229. And they're all within a second of Carlos Sainz, his best time. That is the top 10 for testing. Now here we go, the Lights Out blog. Thanks again. These guys are absolutely awesome. Whoever runs this Twitter, I love it. So Williams fastest sector 1. McLaren fastest sector 2. Williams fastest sector 3. Now, therefore, overall, their best time being a theoretical ideal lap on 89.147. It was Red Bull in second for Sector 1. And McLaren, who were looking quite good as well. They were at nearly 3.323 seconds off in that Sector 1 alone. Sector 2, though, is all about McLaren. It's either going to be set up because that second part of the Bahrain lap is a bit turny-whirny. It does have a lot more turns in than Sector 1 and 2, which is maybe why either they've gone for setup or their car seems to really like the corners more. And Williams seem to have fairly decent straight line speed, as do Mercedes, as do Ferrari. And Ferrari, in terms of their ideal lap, they're only second behind Williams in that ideal lap, as we know. Hamilton doing that second best time. But in terms of race runs, let's have a quick talk about the race runs, because in terms of that, Lewis Hamilton Looking good initially, but the Ferrari seems to not look after its tyres as much, for example, as the McLaren. Those race ones were pretty smooth. People quite happy with it. And the consensus is, before we get into it, the consensus seems to be that McLaren have the slight advantage, and then you've kind of got Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull together, and no one, I think, is really going to stick their neck out of who is best of the rest, but we do believe it's close. Some people were saying, McLaren have maybe a second advantage in the race of 0.4. I don't think. I think it's going to be a lot closer, but if they're saying McLaren seem to have come out of testing the most confident, or looking the most confident, which I kind of agree, if I'm honest. When you look at their body language, they're really, really happy, and then you've got that Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull kind of like in that tight block together. Now, the other outliers seem to be Alpine, seem to be looking quite good, as do Williams. It's by no means fate, because when we look at this, these are the two teams that improved the most, and it's going to be interesting if Williams is going to be ahead now, which I don't think anyone would have guessed, of that midfield battle. Aston Martin, not so much. When we look at the Aston Martin, Fernando had to take over from Lance behind the wheel in the final hour of testing, because Lance did not feel very well at all. I believe he may have even been scheduled for the final day, for the morning. But they thought, okay, we'll give you a bit more time. And yeah, he just wasn't feeling up to it, sadly. But hey, for Alonso, it means more time in the car, which isn't too bad. Now, this is what I thought was interesting. There's no volume to this, but this is Lewis Hamilton. Someone's done this. What the name of SN44 in Bahrain, and you really see the difference between last year's Mercedes and this year's Ferrari with Lewis Hamilton driving. As you can see, Lewis Hamilton still in sector 1, coming into it, and yes, I know that the Mercedes got slightly distracted. But when you see he is already, let me get a marker here. He's already going to be ahead of his best lap. Now look, there we go. He's hitting the apex last year in that Ferrari right now, and you've got to say the Mercedes about a metre behind the apex. Then as we accelerate, now we're going into there's two really tight left-handers. One, not so tight, and then really, really, really reaching. And now if we pause it, the Mercedes has just about got to the apex, but the Ferrari's like, yeah, I'm going to see you later. And he's going to keep powering down here now as we are going to the bridge here, which is here. There's the bridge there for the Ferrari. And yeah, we're talking meters now is the difference as we are now coming into that final sector. So we're still doing it. And when you look at the Ferrari, it does appear a lot smoother than the Mercedes. That's, I feel, a big difference between the two. I think Lewis Hamilton seems a lot more confident in that Ferrari, albeit I don't think it's the fastest outright car. There may be issues around the race pace. So as you can see, look at it. It's just absolutely massive. There's leagues differences between them now. Yeah. The difference is actually crazy, he says, and I completely agree. Before we go, have a quick look at the race. They've got an article saying everything we learned from 2025 F1 pre-season testing. But what did they learn? They're talking about, I can go there. Red Bull has problems. And then they said there are a few reasons why Red Bull seems to be on the back foot. Despite a decent-looking Max Verstappen flyer to go second fastest, it was already playing catch-up a bit after that water leak with Liam Lawson, they're saying. But early on Friday, there were whispers that a 2024 trade understeer leading to exit oversteer was still apparent, and you saw that in a lot of Max's runs. He didn't particularly feel too. He didn't say it, but he didn't seem too comfortable with the car. So who's really on top? Well, it says here, as we've said, long run analysis suggests McLaren has a small but significant advantage, and it remained. This time with Oscar Piastri driving instead of Lando Norris. Piastri was also set to go quickest on the final day before a moment at the final turn. Some in the paddock are very worried about the speed of the McLaren. When did we last hear that? Which has also attracted attention for the movement of its rear wing. Yes. If there is a potential weakness, it's the rear instability. That was well documented on day 2, but McLaren's clearly the favourite. So if you're a McLaren fan, I guess you potentially can maybe rejoice a tiny bit, because I think the McLaren team, they are the winners of at least the winter championship, the testing championship, and they're saying neither Mercedes nor Ferrari turn heads the way McLaren did. They look closely matched almost all week. on short and long runs. The Mercedes looked the easier car to drive, although with a tendency to lock up. We saw Kimi Antonelli lock up a lot, but how much of that is experience? Excuse me, but the Ferrari may have had a bit more pace in hand. That's interesting. So Mercedes easier to drive, but once they nailed it down, the Ferrari slightly faster. Russell's fastest on day 3 said it had been a seamless test, while trackside engineering director Andrew Chauvelin said Mercedes could be pleased with how it's gone. It did seem the smoothest test since the new regulations for Mercedes, the smoothest test they've done. Ferrari data was compromised on its final data when Lewis Hamilton couldn't perform a race simulation as planned. His day ended early as a precaution, having spotted an anomaly in the telemetry. Ferrari said the worst car, well, it's going to be the stake F1. The Sauber was consistently, they're saying, the least impressive car trackside, and that's going to, although we kind of expected it, they finished last in last year's championship. I think Audi are definitely going to be raising an eyebrow and be like, yeah, that's not quite good. Nico Hülkenberg, I think he's going to be like, well, I'm going to stomach this, but I know Audi's back next year. So the most improved. And they're saying the Williams isn't really the fastest car of testing, even though science at day 2 time puts it ahead, but it could be the most improved and caught the eye on all 3 days. And they're saying that it's a car that fundamentally works well, even though its peak came when it was particularly light. The light car, higher engine mode, but the team figures were keen to play down just how strong they were. But Alpine, they're talking about, was also positive on its own performance this week, and justifiably so, is saying the race. The car looks decent on track and the drivers have fed back that relative satisfaction. Is that then, going into Australia, one of the big questions in Alpine is not really how fast they are, is going to be Doohan versus Colapinto, which I still think is really unfair. But basically that's it. It's kind of annoying, isn't it? And it was also a debut this week for a revised trackside leadership. Sporting director Julian Rouse is now focusing solely on the Alpine Academy that he was previously director of alongside his F1 team role, which is good. And they also say Aston Martin hasn't done enough, and I think that's true. When Adrian Newey starts at his new team, and Aston Martin next week, he might kick things off by digesting some roaring data from the test. Yeah, although they finished 5th in the championship last year, which they're saying is a respectable result, its performance trajectory was poor for the second year running, and potentially it's looking poor here. Mini DRS war revived. Okay, so they're saying F1 already looks to be heading for its first tech controversy of the year as mini DRS chatter. As if you remember, that was all about McLaren and Baku last year, when McLaren said, okay, we're not going to run this mini DRS rear wing, even though it wasn't against the rules. But they decided not to. It may well have been the fact that another team, so, Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, could have protested it. So teams began to dig deeper, they're saying, into what their rivals are up to. And onboard footage from Weirards facing cameras have highlighted some interesting behaviours, with some wings, like the Mercedes, appearing to notably bend back on the straights before popping back onto an upright position when the car slows for corners. But they're saying, as Red Bull's technical director Washe pointed out, other rear wing flexi tricks have been spotted too, with suspicions that teams could be trying to exploit the mini DRS benefit that McLaren put to very good use last year in Baku. It's still going on, explained Washe. I think Ferrari and McLaren are doing the mini DRS stuff still. Washe's reference relates to the trick of flexing that rear wing, and which was, as you know, pioneered by McLaren. So for 2025, they're saying the FIA have implemented these tough rules to eradicate this mini DRS, but the eyes of McLaren's rivals will now be on whether it has found another way to extract it, because once again, you're the fastest car, you're the big person in the playground, you're going to be the target, aren't you? Stitch up for the real rookies. And they're saying there's a crop of rookies on the grid, which is sadly limited testing. Ollie Behrman at least raced in 3 Grand Prix. Jack Doohan made his debut, but have also done extensive. But Kimi Antonelli racked up thousands of miles. But they're saying Gabriel Bortoletto and Isaac Hadjar are in a slightly different position. They haven't had that much practice, and I kind of understand. When talking about Haas, they said they were mainly concentrated on long run form rather than performance running, and a strange bodywork problem has now struck twice with the team's Silverstone shakedown. Ocon was spotted returning to the pitch with missing side pods. That's slightly unfortunate. The team boss, Komatsu, didn't reveal what the cause of the issue was, only saying that a modification had been made from last year and it was clearly too aggressive. Okay, fair enough. So McLaren wins the Winter Championship, and I think they have an advantage. It's not like a Red Bull advantage, but it may well help them in Australia. But remember, Australia is a very different circuit. And then you've got Ferrari and Ferrari and Mercedes and Red Bull kind of in chasing McLaren, being very close. And you've got the midfield. But the midfield, it seemed to be Williams and Alpine seem to be the outliers of that midfield. Anyway, if you made it to the end, you are awesome. A massive thank you. Just clicking on this video is more than enough. If you want to do a bit more, hit that subscribe button. That would be absolutely fantastic. I'd really, really appreciate that. If you want to do a bit more, hit that like button and comment. That'd be nice. But anyway, I digress. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time. But above all else, stay safe.